Welcome, Laura Catherine.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Olson.
My name is Laura Catherine Smith. I'm a student here at UNC.
And we're working together to try and bring attention to issues facing youth caregivers. So we thought that we would make these vlogs as our contribution to starting the conversation here at UNC and maybe at other universities. So, Laura Catherine.
So,
what is a youth caregiver?
I'm glad you asked. So, a youth caregiver, in my definition, is someone who is under the age of 18, or if they're a young adult caregiver, over the age of 18, but someone who is a child, in a sense, taking care of another family member, whether that's a sibling or grandparent or parent, and whether they have a disability or they just have medical issues that they need assistance with. So doing all kinds of different roles for that person, like doing all kinds of different chores, assisting them in taking medications, preparing meals for them, that kind of thing. And so yeah, this is essentially the opposite of the normal situation where a child is giving care for usually an older person, and instead of the other way around.
Right. And I guess that, yeah, that's close to kind of the definition that we use as researchers, which is to think about young people who are providing care. We tend to distinguish from babysitting, unless if that babysitting happens because an adult, such as a parent or grandparent, or other older relative, can't take care of another child. So, yeah, youth caregivers end up doing a lot of different things, and it depends, I guess, on what kind of care is required by the person who needs some support. If it's a grandparent, it might be issues of dementia or Alzheimer's. If it's, in your case, we have also some really good, specific instances of the kinds of care that you do, because I know you have a great relationship with your mom, who you continue to assist as a caregiver.
Yeah, so both my parents, growing up, have been on Social Security disability. So both of them are technically disabled as classified by the state, but for different reasons. My mom has a neurodegenerative autoimmune disease called multiple sclerosis, which affects a lot of different areas of her functioning. It impairs her cognition, her speech, vision, mobility, getting around the house, just being able to walk around, causes a lot of different issues with osteoporosis, and that's like a related kind of issue because of the mobility and the balance issues that kind of joins together with that osteoporosis, and so she falls, she breaks something, and that kind of thing. And so some of the work that I do for her is very basic, just helping her get groceries, because with MS, you wake up tired, you wake up exhausted, and just getting out of bed and doing something as simple as just getting in the car and going to the grocery stores is too much, and can be too much, and sometimes you have muscle spasms to the point where you can't get out of bed, in which case you would have to use a wheelchair to get around. So just kind of thinking about those kinds of issues. What I do for her is I sometimes will go over as a student and as someone who's almost 22 years old. I've been doing this my entire life, but what I do has changed over the years. Because
so now you're a university student.
Yeah, so very different.
I mean, what kinds of things do you do now while you're still also studying and, helping me out and all the other good things that you get up to?
Yeah, so it's definitely stressful and overwhelming, being a student full-time and also trying to manage to take care of someone off campus. My mom lives about 20 minutes away from campus, and so I will take her groceries if she hasn't been grocery shopping. I'll kind of help her with her dog. She has a service dog, and sometimes when she really is struggling with getting around the house, he doesn't get the exercise that he needs. So I could go over and like take him to the dog park, take him for walks. I'll go over and take her to her doctor's appointments, help her with chores around the house, getting things down from the attic, things that she can't really do. So yeah, like a lot of different kind of roles that have become more adult roles for me than when I was a kid. It was more just like being emotional support for her, which of course I still do, but I can do a lot more physically now that being older.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about like mutual care, the idea that it's a family caregiving unit. So I know that also you feel like you receive care.
Yeah, for sure. She definitely like with MS you have good weeks and bad weeks, and so when she is having a good week and like isn't having a lot of symptoms, and I'll be sick or something, she'll bring me like soup and like just be that very stereotypical mom of like coming over and like bringing me crackers and soup and like kind of like taking care of me.
I love crackers.
I love crackers and soup.
It's
two of my favorite foods, so it's really nice. Especially when I don't have to make them. That makes it even better.
So, I mean, but I think it's hard for people to get their heads around. Maybe some of the folks who are watching our vlog can quite easily, because they might be in the same situation, helping to take care of a grandparent or a sibling with mental illness or anything like that. But I think for other people it's really hard to imagine what it's like to be a student and be a caregiver at the same time. I mean, what are some of the little things that have acted as barriers for you that you think like, well, this seems like it should be easy to change?
So there's a couple different policies that I think most universities, for sure UNC being specific to me, could implement that would just make really large differences, a huge impact on these young caregivers, and that wouldn't be very difficult to change policy-wise. Like, for instance, priority registration for youth caregivers would be huge, being able to organize your schedule. I organize my schedule so that I have class Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. In past semesters I've had both, but that allows me to have a couple days off a week, and if my mom knows which days I have off, she can schedule some of her doctor's appointments where she doesn't really like driving, especially after a doctor's appointment, when she like gets treatments or something that like can impair that. So kind of being there for that and being able to have those days off to like really go out and help her and like go to different events with her and kind of like have that time available. And like that's a huge thing for me that makes like a big difference in like how my ability to give care to my mom, because it gives me that time
and be a good student still,
and still like be able to go to all my classes,
right?
And so like that's a huge thing. Having a parking pass for students, because I do so much with my car, involving my car. So much of it is like transporting my mom to and from appointments or getting her medications or groceries or whatever it is. And so having a parking pass would make a huge difference. And I know that like my first year I was denied a parking pass because they didn't view my caregiving as legitimate enough to qualify for that, and didn't really understand why I needed to have one, even though I explained to them that I have a mom who has this disease that could potentially put her in the hospital at any day, any moment of any day.
And I know you've talked about that, like having to really quickly respond to an emergency that's come up and stuff, and trying to sort out like, I'm in class, gotta get to my mom, need to make plans to make up for everything, but I can't quite do that right now, and studying in the hospital and things like that.
There's a lot of, I think, situations that a lot of caregivers have perhaps found themselves in. Similar situations where, for instance, during my finals week, my mom was having surgery on her hand after she had broken it, again, just like falling or doing something very simple, and so she was getting surgery and she needed someone to drive her to the doctors and back home and like pick up her medications and make sure that she got settled and everything. And so that was me, because I'm the only one that is here and lives in the same state, and is close enough. Like both my siblings live in Georgia and one lives in Colorado, so that burden really falls on me. And so just studying note cards, in the waiting room of an OR.
Yeah.
Or another instance when like I was in class and it was like an evening lecture and I got a phone call from my mom and I was like, oh, well, she probably just wants to talk to me or something, and ignored it. And then subsequently got a couple more phone calls and then a number I didn't recognize. And so I was like really like, okay, something's going on, and had to excuse myself from class to speak with her doctor about how she was in the hospital and needed someone to come pick her up. And just like things like that a lot of people would not have any idea like what that's like to be 20 years old trying to manage college, and then also being put in this situation where at any moment you could be getting a phone call from a hospital or something like that, and finding out that your like parent or the person that you're giving care to has been injured in some way. And that's just like a whole different world. And it's really sad because a lot of these students do get kind of pinned and pigeonholed as these truancy students that are lazy and don't want to come to class and are skipping, and it's really not that's not the case, but they feel uncomfortable sharing these kinds of like this kind of like really personal information about their lives with faculty, with professors, with healthcare providers, because they are so afraid of that. If the case is that they are under 18, afraid of someone interpreting that as neglect.
We get a lot of that. It's really, with the work for the 8 to 18s, it's hard to explain to people that this kind of youth caregiving is not necessarily neglect. These can be families that just need some barriers removed, and especially when it comes to school, which I know you also lived, and we'll probably talk a lot more about in our future vlogs. And the main thing that we're trying to do, of course, here at UNC is to find out how many caregivers are out there that are students, and really try to gather up our knowledge, both to share with each other, but also to share with the university, and see how we can continue removing barriers for you all.
Yeah.
So you can be the phenomenal students you already are.
And just kind of bringing awareness and recognition to this group that has flown under the radar for so long and is doing such incredible work and not getting any acknowledgement, not getting any recognition for it.
Well, on that note, thank you.
Yeah.
For being an amazing caregiver already all of your life, Yeah. That's pretty darn cool. So one last question for you. If you were stranded on the top of a beautiful mountain and you could only have one thing and it can't be water, what would it be?
She's on the top of a mountain?
On the top of a mountain.
I'd probably want a lighter so that I can make a fire and not freeze.
Oh my gosh, you should go on that survival show.
Yeah.
Naked and Afraid.
Hopefully I wouldn't be naked.
That was a good...
That'd be really cold.
That was a good, reasonable response.
Just some flint and steel, really. That's all I really need.
I should hope there's some wood up there for you.
It's gonna be the trick, is burrowing under the snow to find that. Oh man. And for my final question for you, who is your favorite fiction author?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good Verte Echo, for sure. Name of the Rose. It was like a book that changed my life. Not in the same way that other books changed my life, but that one was so beautifully written, and it's sort of a labyrinth, and you get lost in the labyrinth.
I'll have to check that out. Sounds like a great book.
I'll lend it to you. I'm sure I have copies. So on that note,
thank you for joining us.
And please, we'd love to hear from you, especially if you're a caregiver at UNC. Get in touch with us. Let us know that you're out there, and we're going to continue doing this and try and start getting some good advice from Laura Catherine about how she's managed caregiving in school here at UNC.
Yeah, and please, if you have anything to add or any comments or questions, post them in the comments section. We can maybe address them in future videos.
Yep. All right.